They gave me 2 Apache sisters as property-bound, silent, and broken because I brought their outlaw back breathing instead of dead. The town council called it a reward. I called it the ugliest thing I'd ever seen civilized men do. So I cut their ropes in front of everyone and walked away. But freedom's a strange thing in 1881. Arizona, sometimes it follows you home, sits by your fence line, and waits to see if you're the kind of man who means what he does. This is that story. Stay until the end and comment what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this truth can travel. The desert wind carried dust and the smell of coming rain when I rode into Broken Mesa with Jack Holloway bleeding across my saddle. 3 weeks I'd tracked that son of a bitch through canyon country, through Apache land, through places where the rocks themselves seemed to watch you. The bounty said dead or alive, but I'd brought him alive because killing a man when you don't have to changes something in you. I'd already changed enough. Holloway groaned as my horse Dakota picked his way down Main Street. Blood had soaked through the bandages I'd wrapped around his shoulder. My bullet clean through missed the bone. He'd lived to see a rope which was more mercy than he'd shown the folks he'd robbed. Broken Mesa hadn't changed much in the 2 years since I'd turned in my sheriff's badge. Same sun-bleached buildings, same faces weathered like old leather, same smell of horse shit and yesterday's hope. But the eyes that tracked me now held something different. Not respect exactly, more like calculation. I pulled Dakota to a stop outside the council hall. Councilman Pritchard stood on the porch, his belly straining against a vest that cost more than most men earned in a season. Beside him, Mayor Hutchins, Deputy Marshal Webb, and 3 other council members formed a wall of self-importance. Boon Laramie, Pritchard called out, his voice carrying that particular smugness of men who've never had to earn what they have. Heard you were tracking Holloway. Didn't think you'd bring him in breathing. Bounty didn't specify, I said, dismounting. I hauled Holloway down, not gentle but not cruel either. He hit the dirt with a grunt, wrists still bound with the rawhide I'd used. 500 dead or alive. I'll take alive money. Pritchard descended the steps, his boots clicking on wood that probably cost some family their farmstead. He circled Holloway like a man inspecting livestock. Problem is, Laramie Bounty was posted dead or alive, but the reward was for dead, town budget being what it is. I felt something cold settle in my gut. We had terms, Pritchard. Terms change. He smiled, showing teeth too white, too perfect. But the council, in recognition of your service, we voted to give you something better than silver. That's when I heard the wagon. It came around from behind the council hall, driven by Tom Dixon, who ran the trading post. Tom wouldn't meet my eyes. In the back of that wagon, sitting on bare wood, with their hands bound and their heads down, were 2 Apache women. They were young, maybe 20, maybe younger. Twins, I realized, looking at them. Same high cheekbones, same copper skin, same long black hair, hanging loose and tangled. They wore simple cotton dresses, torn and dirty, and their feet were bare despite the rough terrain. But it was their eyes that hit me hardest. Dark eyes that had gone somewhere far away to whatever place people retreat when the world becomes too much to bear. The Garrett gang had them when we raided their camp last month. Pritchard said, his voice taking on that false heartiness men use when they're doing something shameful. Apaches, both of them. Sisters. Been captive near 6 months, we figure. No family came looking. No tribe claimed them. He gestured broadly like he was presenting a prize. They're yours, Laramie, for your trouble. Compensation for the adjusted bounty. The world seemed to narrow to a single point of terrible clarity. You're giving me people, I said slowly. Human beings, as payment. Now, Boone. Mayor Hutchins stepped forward, hands raised in what he probably thought was a peacemaking gesture. Let's not get philosophical. These girls got no place to go. Apaches won't take them back, been with white men too long. They need direction, structure, A Christian household. You're a respectable man, got that ranch. You could what? My voice came out quiet. That was worse than shouting. Men who knew me understood that. Could own them, keep them like cattle. Could give them purpose. Pritchard snapped his facade, cracking. Could give them work, shelter, civilize them proper. It's more mercy than they'd get wandering alone. More than the Apaches would give them now. You want your money, Laramie? There isn't any. You want something for 3 weeks' work. This is what we got. I looked at the two women again. One of them, the one on the left, had raised her head slightly. She was looking at me now, and in those dark eyes I saw something I recognized. Not hope. Hope was too kind a word. It was more like the last flicker of a candle before it drowns in its own wax. The final assessment of whether the next hell would be worse than the current one. My father had been a preacher before the whiskey took him. He used to say that every man faces moments when his soul's weight gets measured, not by God necessarily, but by himself, by the part of him that has to look in mirrors and live with what looks back. This was one of those moments. The street had gone quiet. Folks had gathered, shopkeepers, ranchers, the blacksmith with his hammer still in hand, everyone watching to see what Boon Laramie, the ex-sheriff who'd walked away from the law, would do when faced with this particular version of frontier justice. I walked to the wagon slowly. Tom Dixon flinched when I got close, like he thought I might hit him. Maybe I should have. The two women tensed, and I saw the one on the right shift, slightly putting herself between me and her sister, protecting her even now, even bound and helpless. "What are your names?" I asked quietly. They didn't answer, probably didn't speak English, or maybe they'd learned that answering white men was just another way to get hurt. I pulled out my knife, a bone-handled thing I'd carried since the war. The twin who'd positioned herself as guardian flinched but didn't cry out, didn't beg, just straightened her spine and lifted her chin, meeting whatever was coming with the kind of dignity that puts most men to shame. I cut the ropes on her wrists first, then her sister's. "You're free," I said. Didn't matter if they understood the words. Maybe they'd understand the action. "Nobody owns you. Not me, not them. Nobody." Behind me, Pritchard sputtered, "Now wait just a damn minute." I turned, and whatever he saw in my face shut him up mid-sentence. "You want to do something with them," I said quietly. "You help them. You find their people. You give them actual Christian charity, if that's what you're calling it. But you don't—" My voice went hard as coffin nails. "You don't ever try to give me human beings as payment for services rendered. Not ever again." I looked at the two women one more time. They sat there, unmoving, hands free, but still frozen in place like birds whose cage door has opened but can't quite believe it's safe to fly. "Go on," I said softer. "Get." Then I turned my back on all of them. The council, the women, the watching crowd mounted Dakota and rode out of Broken Mesa. The rain that had been threatening finally broke open about 3 miles out. Cold autumn rain that turned the dust to mud and made Dakota's footing treacherous. I didn't care, I just rode, letting the water soak through my coat, my shirt down to skin that felt too tight for the anger and disgust churning underneath. 500 in silver would have bought winter supplies, would have fixed the barn roof before snow came, would have meant not eating quite so thin come February, but some things you can't afford at any price. My ranch sat in a valley about 12 miles from town, backed up against red rock cliffs that glowed like coals at sunset. Small operation, just me, 40 head of cattle, some chickens, a vegetable patch that fought me every season. The house was adobe 2 rooms built by the Mexican family that had owned this land before me. Simple, sturdy, more than one man needed. I put Dakota in the barn, rubbed him down despite the rain still hammering on the roof, gave him extra oats, he'd earned them. The physical work felt good, focusing on leather and horsehair, instead of the memory of those 2 women sitting bound in that wagon. When I finally trudged to the house, soaked through and cold, I built up the fire and sat in front of it, in the one chair I owned. Rain drummed on the roof, wind moaned through gaps in the adobe. The flames cast shadows that moved like dancers, like ghosts, like memories I tried hard not to think about. I must have fallen asleep there because I woke to silence. The rain had stopped. Gray dawn light filtered through the window. I was stiff cold, and my neck ached from the angle I'd slept at. I stood joints popping and walked to the door to check if the rain had done any damage. That's when I saw them. The two Apache women sat on the ground about 20 yards from my house, just inside the fence line. They'd wrapped themselves in saddle blankets, mine, I realized, from the barn. They sat close together, not speaking, just watching the house, watching me. My first instinct was anger. I'd cut them loose. I'd walked away. Why in God's name had they followed me? But then I remembered their eyes in that wagon, the way the one sister had positioned herself to protect the other, the dignity with which they'd faced what they thought was coming. They had nowhere else to go. I stood there in my doorway for a long moment. This ex-sheriff, who'd wanted nothing more than to be left alone looking at two women who'd been given to me like property, and then freed only to follow me home anyway, because freedom without somewhere to go is just another kind of prison. I could run them off. Should probably. This was going to complicate everything. The town would talk. People would assume. My nice, quiet isolation was about to get loud, but I thought about those ropes I'd cut, about the choice I'd made in front of everyone. If you cut a person free but leave them with nothing, how free are they, really? I went back inside, pulled together what I had, some bread, dried meat, a canteen of water. I put it in a small basket and carried it outside. The women watched me approach, tense, ready to run or fight. I set the basket down about halfway between my door and where they sat, then turned and walked back to the house without a word. Behind me I heard nothing. No movement, no voices. I went about my morning, stoked the fire, put coffee on, changed into dry clothes. I didn't look out the window, didn't check to see if they'd taken the food, just gave them space to make their own choice. It wasn't until I was heading to the barn to start morning chores that I saw the basket, empty, placed neatly beside my door with the cloth I'd wrapped the bread in, folded, precise and careful on top. When I looked toward the fence line, they were still there, still wrapped in my saddle blankets, still watching. But now the one on the left, the one who'd looked at me in the wagon with that dying candle assessment, she raised one hand slightly, not waving, just acknowledging. I nodded back. Then I went to tend my cattle, and the world kept turning, and two Apache women I'd freed but couldn't quite leave, helpless, stayed by my fence line while we all figured out what the hell came next. The town could talk all it wanted. I'd made my choice when I cut those ropes. Now I had to live with it. And somehow, someway, I had to figure out how to let them live with it too, on their terms, not mine. Free but not abandoned, helped but not owned. It was going to be harder than tracking Jack Holloway through Apache territory, but then again, the hard things always are. 3 days passed in a strange, silent rhythm that felt like learning a new language without words. Each morning before dawn, I'd wake to find them already awake by the fence line, blankets folded neat despite the cold that turned breath to fog. I'd leave food on the porch, never approaching them directly, never expecting thanks. By the time I'd finished my first cup of coffee, the plate would be empty and returned to exactly the same spot, wiped clean with careful hands. They never came closer to the house, never crossed that invisible boundary they'd drawn for themselves. But they didn't leave either. On the fourth morning, I found 3 eggs beside the empty breakfast plate. My chickens had been escaping their coop for weeks, laying wherever they pleased. Someone had gathered them carefully without breaking a single shell. I stood there looking at those eggs for longer than I should have, understanding what they meant. Not payment. Something else. Acknowledgement, maybe? Or the beginning of exchange between people instead of charity given to the helpless. That afternoon, I was mending fence when I noticed the vegetable patch looked different. The weeds I'd been meaning to pull for 2 weeks were gone. The rows were straight again the way they'd looked in spring before neglect had taken over. I turned toward the fence line. The two women sat there as always, but now I saw the dirt under their fingernails, the slight dishevelment of their hair. "You didn't have to do that," I called out, knowing they probably couldn't understand. The one on the left, the one who'd protected her sister in the wagon, tilted her head slightly. Her eyes met mine with that same fierce dignity, but something else flickered there now. Not quite trust. More like the possibility of it, distant as stars, but real. By the end of the first week, I'd learned to read their movements. The protective one was always alert, always positioning herself between her sister and any potential threat, including me. The quieter sister moved with a slight limp I hadn't noticed before, favoring her left leg. Sometimes she'd touch her side, like something hurt there, something internal that didn't show. I left medicine on the porch one morning, willow bark for pain, yarrow for inflammation. The protective one examined it with suspicion before the quieter sister took it with shaking hands. The next day she walked a little easier. The second week brought the first real cold. Frost silvered the grass each morning, and the wind that came down from the mountains carried the promise of early snow. I couldn't watch them sleep outside anymore, blankets or not, but I couldn't force them inside either, wouldn't force them anywhere after what they'd been through, so I did what I could without pushing. I left heavier blankets on the porch, built up the fire in the barn and left the door unlatched, put out warmer food stew instead of bread, coffee instead of water. They took the blankets. The barn door stayed unlatched. The stew bowl came back empty. Small steps. Careful ones. Like approaching a wild animal that's been trapped before. You don't rush. You don't grab. You just make space and wait. On the 10th night, the quieter sister started coughing. I heard it from inside the house, a wet, rattling sound that spoke of chest congestion, maybe pneumonia starting. The protective one's voice rose for the first time since they'd arrived, speaking rapid Apache that I couldn't understand, but recognized as fear. I grabbed my medicine kit and headed for the barn, hoping they'd moved inside with the temperature dropping. They had. They'd made a small nest in the hay, both wrapped in the blankets I'd given them. The quieter one was shaking her face, flushed with fever, while her sister held her and kept talking in that urgent, frightened voice. "Let me help," I said quietly from the doorway. "Please." The protective one looked at me with eyes that held everything: suspicion, desperation, the terrible mathematics of risk that people who've been hurt too often have to calculate every moment. Her sister coughed again, and the sound decided it. She nodded once. I knelt in the hay beside them, moving slow, keeping my hands visible. Up close, I could see the quieter one's lips had a bluish tinge. Her breathing was shallow, labored. Fever burned through her skin like she was cooking from the inside. "Pneumonia, maybe," I said, more to myself than them. "Need to break the fever, open her lungs." I mixed willow bark tea, added honey and whiskey. The whiskey to help her sleep, to make the medicine easier to take. The protective sister watched every move I made, ready to fight if I did anything wrong. I held the cup to the sick one's lips. "Drink," I said gently. "It'll help." She drank, grimacing at the bitter taste, but she drank it all. Then I soaked cloths in cold water and placed them on her forehead, her neck, her wrists, anywhere the blood ran close to the surface. The protective one watched, then started doing it herself, understanding without explanation. "What's your name?" I asked her softly. "You got to have a name." She looked at me for a long moment. Then carefully, like the word was made of glass, she said, "Allo." Her voice was rough from disuse, accented but clear. She spoke English. Maybe not much, but some. "Allo," I repeated. "That's good. That's a good name. I'm Boon." She nodded like she already knew. Then she touched her sister's fevered face and said, "Nia." "Nia," I said. "All right, we'll take care of Nia." That night became a vigil. Nia's fever climbed higher and her coughing got worse. Allo wouldn't leave her side, wouldn't sleep. I stayed too, changing the cool cloths, mixing more medicine, monitoring the ragged breathing that sometimes seemed to stop altogether before starting again with a gasp. Around midnight, Nia started shaking so hard I thought she might crack apart. Aloe held her, whispering in Apache prayers, maybe, or promises, or just the sound of love trying to hold someone to this world when everything's pulling them toward the next. "We need more blankets," I said. "Keep her warm while the fever breaks. I'll get them from the house." I ran through the cold, grabbed every blanket I owned, and came back to find Aloe still holding her sister, still whispering. I piled the blankets over them, tucked them in like my mother used to do when I was small and afraid of the dark. "She'll be all right," I said, not knowing if it was true but needing to say it anyway. "She's strong, I can see it." Aloe looked up at me, and her eyes were wet. Not crying, she wouldn't let herself cry, but wet all the same. "She is strong," she said haltingly. "Strong. Before the men, before the—" She gestured, unable to find the word, or maybe unwilling to say it. "I know," I said quietly. "I'm sorry. I'm sorry for what happened to you both." She studied my face like she was reading a book in a language she only half understood. Then she said something that hit harder than any bullet I'd ever taken. "You are the first man who say sorry." We sat there in this barn through the long night, two strangers bound by the fragile life between us. I kept the medicine coming, kept the cloths cool, while Aloe held her sister and refused to let go. The horses shifted in their stalls. An owl called from somewhere in the darkness. The world kept turning indifferent to whether one Apache woman lived or died in a barn in Arizona territory. But we weren't indifferent. We fought for her, Aloe and I, with everything we had: medicine and prayer and the sheer stubborn refusal to let the darkness win. Just before dawn, Naya's fever broke. The terrible heat that had burned through her skin faded to normal warmth. Her breathing eased, deepened, became the rhythm of actual sleep instead of unconscious struggle. Aloe felt the change immediately, her whole body sagging with relief, so profound it was almost collapse. "She's through it," I said. "The worst is past." Aloe laid her cheek against Naya's hair and closed her eyes. Her lips moved silently, thanks to whatever god she prayed to, or maybe just to the universe that had decided not to take one more thing from her. I stood, joints cracking from hours of kneeling in hay. "I'll bring breakfast out. You both need to eat, build strength." "Boon," Aloe said, and I turned back. She was looking at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Gratitude, yes, but something else too. Something like the first crack in a wall that's been built too thick and too high for too long. "Thank you." 2 words, simple ones, but they carried the weight of everything she couldn't say, all the fear and relief and the strange, tentative thing that might eventually become trust if we were both careful enough. "You're welcome," I said. I left them in the barn and walked back to the house through the gray light of early morning. The air smelled like frost and sage and the particular crispness that comes before winter fully arrives. I felt exhausted, wrung out, but something else too. Something I hadn't felt in the 2 years since I'd turned in my badge and tried to forget what it meant to be responsible for other people's lives. Purpose, maybe. Or just the simple knowledge that I'd done something right in a world that made it real easy to do wrong. Inside, I built up the fire and made breakfast more than usual, enough for 3. I put it in a basket with fresh coffee and carried it to the barn. Aloe was awake, sitting with Nia's head in her lap, stroking her sister's hair with gentle fingers. Nia slept peacefully now, color returning to her face. "Food," I said, setting the basket where Aloe could reach it. She looked at the basket, then at me, then did something that surprised us both. She stood carefully, settling Nia's head on folded blankets, and walked to where I stood. Up close, I could see she was younger than I'd thought, maybe 19, maybe less. Her face was beautiful in the way of things that have survived, despite everything trying to break them. "You stay all night," she said. It wasn't a question. "Yes. For Nia, for stranger, for a person who needed help," I corrected gently. "That's all. Just a person who needed help." She considered this, her dark eyes searching my face like she was trying to solve a puzzle that didn't make sense according to every rule she'd learned. Then she reached out, hesitated, and touched my hand, just briefly, just her fingers against mine for the space of a heartbeat. "You are good man," she said quietly. "Nia and we forget there are good men. We forget for long time." Then she took the basket, returned to her sister, and began to eat with the careful, measured bites of someone who's known hunger and doesn't take food for granted. I left them there and went to start my chores, but something had shifted. The boundaries were still there. They still wouldn't enter the house, still kept their distance, but the wall between us had developed that first crack. Not trust yet, but maybe the possibility of it. Over the next week, as Nia recovered, that crack widened. I'd find small things done around the ranch, the chicken coop repaired with clever hands, my work shirts mended with stitches finer than I could ever manage, firewood stacked more neatly than I'd left it. They never asked permission, never waited for instruction. They just moved through my space like water, finding what needed doing and doing it. I tried to stop them at first. "You don't owe me anything," I'd say. "You don't have to work." But Aloe would just look at me with those fierce eyes and say, "We know we do because we choose." And that, I realized, was the whole point. Choice. The freedom to work, not because someone forced you, but because you decided it needed doing. The dignity of contribution instead of dependence. So I stopped objecting and started leaving better tools where they could find them. Started teaching Aloe English words she didn't know, not commanding her to learn, just offering when she seemed to want them. Started including them in the daily rhythm of the ranch, not as servants, but as what partners felt too presumptuous. Companions wasn't quite right either. People I decided, just people sharing space and work and the strange comfort of not being alone. One morning, about 3 weeks after that fever-broken night, I came out to find Aloe sitting on my porch. Not near the door, but on the steps, drinking coffee from one of my cups. She'd never come this close before, never claimed this much space. I stood there uncertain, afraid to push, afraid to retreat. "I can go if—" I started. "Sit," she said, gesturing to the other end of the porch. "I make coffee. Is good, yes." I sat, careful to leave distance between us, and took the cup she handed me. The coffee was good, better than mine, actually. She'd added something, some herb I didn't recognize, that gave it a subtle warmth. We sat there in silence as the sun climbed higher, painting the red rocks gold and copper. Two people drinking coffee, not quite comfortable, but not quite strangers anymore either. Somewhere in between, in that space where broken things start to remember what whole felt like. "My father," Aloe said, suddenly her voice soft, "he say the best Apache can sit with silence, not need words for everything. The land speaks enough." "Sounds like a wise man," I said. "He was." She stared at the horizon. "Before the soldiers came, before they take us to reservation, before everything break." She turned to look at me. "You have family." "Had," I said. "Parents gone, sister married, moved east. Haven't seen her in 6 years." "You are alone then?" "I am." She nodded slowly, understanding something in that admission. "Nia and we are alone too, our people." She struggled for the words. "Our people not want us now. We are broken goods, dirty. The men they—" She stopped, unable or unwilling to continue. "You're not dirty," I said firmly. "You're not broken, you're survivors." She looked at me with something like surprise, like she'd forgotten that survival was itself a kind of strength. Then, so quietly I almost missed it, she said, "You are first person who see us, really see, not as things, not as shame, as people." "That's all you ever were," I said, "all you ever should have been treated as." We sat in silence after that, but it felt different now. Heavier with understanding, lighter with the burden of isolation lifted just slightly. When she stood to go, she paused at the steps. "Tonight," she said, "Nia and I cook. You eat with us. In barn is—" She searched for the word, "is thank you," but also is share, equal share. "I'd like that," I said. That evening I walked to the barn to find they'd transformed it. Blankets hung to section off a space, candles burned in tin holders, and the smell of cooking filled the air, something with corn and peppers and spices that made my mouth water. They'd used my supplies but created something entirely their own. Nia was sitting up still weak but smiling the first time I'd seen her smile. It changed her whole face, made her look younger, less haunted. Aloe gestured to a seat they'd made from folded blankets. "Sit, we eat together." The food was incredible flavors I'd never tasted, techniques I didn't know. We ate mostly in silence, but it was comfortable now, natural. When Nia coughed, Aloe would rub her back. When I reached for more, they'd smile, pleased their cooking was appreciated. After dinner, Aloe spoke in Apache to her sister, who nodded. Then Aloe turned to me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Nia, she want to say thank you. For the medicine, for staying with fever. She not speak English much, but she want you to know." Nia reached out and took my hand in both of hers. Her grip was weak but earnest. She spoke in Apache, the words flowing soft and musical, and Aloe translated. "She says you could have leave her to die. Many men would. They would say one less Apache is good thing, but you stay. You fight for her life like she matter, like she is worth saving." Aloe's voice caught slightly. "She says you give her back something she thought was gone forever. She says you give her back her worth." I looked at Nia, at the tears streaming down her face, at the gratitude and relief and terrible joy of someone who'd forgotten they deserved to live and was just now remembering. "You always had worth," I said, and Aloe translated, "Always. What those men did, what anyone did, it doesn't change what you are. It never did." Nia pulled my hand to her forehead in a gesture I didn't understand but felt the weight of. Then she released me and said something else in Apache. Aloe smiled faintly. "She says our mother used to say that the spirits send us people when we most need them. She says maybe you are spirit sent." "I'm just a man," I said. "Yes," Aloe agreed, "but maybe that is enough." That night, walking back to my house under stars that burned like silver fire, I thought about what Aloe had said, about being seen, about being enough, about the strange paths that lead us to the people we're meant to meet. I'd cut their ropes because it was right. I'd helped Nia because it was necessary. I'd given them space and food and medicine because I couldn't do otherwise and still look at myself in the mirror. But somewhere in all of that, without meaning to, without planning it, I'd done something else too. I'd given them back their humanity, and in doing so, they'd given me back mine. The house felt emptier than usual that night, but it was a different kind of empty, not lonely, just waiting, like something was about to change, about to fill that space with life again. I didn't know what came next. Didn't know how this strange arrangement would work long term, or what the town would say, or how to navigate the delicate balance of helping without controlling, caring without possessing. But I knew one thing for certain. I'd made the right choice when I cut those ropes. And I'd keep making it every day, in every small action, until these two women who'd been given to me like property understood down to their bones that they were free. Free to stay, free to go, free to just be. That was enough. That had to be enough. And somehow in the silence of that Arizona night, it was. The change came slowly, like dawn creeping across the desert, so gradual you didn't notice until suddenly the whole world was different. By the end of the first month, Aloe and Nia had moved from the barn to a small room I'd cleared in the back of the house. Not because I'd insisted, but because the nights were getting too cold, even with blankets and fire, and Aloe had finally accepted what I'd been offering all along, shelter that didn't come with strings attached. They'd hesitated at the threshold for a long time that first night, Nia leaning on her sister, both of them looking at that open door like it might be a trap. "It's just a room," I'd said quietly. "Yours if you want it. No obligations." Aloe had studied my face in the lamplight, doing that thing she did, where she seemed to read a man's soul through his eyes. Whatever she saw there must have satisfied her, because she'd nodded once and helped Nia inside. By morning, they'd transformed the bare space into something that was theirs, blankets arranged just so, their few possessions organized with careful precision, the smell of sage burning in a small clay bowl I hadn't known I owned. They were making a home, not in my house exactly, just in proximity to it. That distinction mattered. The work rhythm we'd fallen into became something more deliberate. I'd handle the heavy labor fence mending cattle work, anything requiring a horse or brute strength. They'd manage the house and garden the chickens, the careful work that required patience and attention. But it wasn't divided by gender or expectation. It was divided by choice, by natural inclination, by what made sense. Some mornings I'd find Aloe in the barn learning to saddle Dakota, her movements careful but determined. Other times Nia would sit on the porch shelling beans while I worked nearby, and she'd hum these old songs that made the air feel thick with history and loss and something beautiful that had survived both. We were building something. I just didn't know what to call it yet. Winter came in hard the first week of December. Snow fell heavy and stayed turning the desert into something alien and pure. The cattle needed constant tending. The water had to be broken free from ice each morning, and the cold settled into your bones and wouldn't leave. But the house stayed warm. Aloe had learned to manage the fire better than I ever had, keeping it fed just right so it burned steady without waste. Nia cooked meals that filled the small space with warmth and smell and the comfort of shared sustenance. In the evenings, we'd sit around that fire, me in my chair, them on cushions they'd sewn from spare fabric, and exist together in silence or small conversation. Aloe's English improved rapidly. She was hungry for words, for the power they gave her to shape her own narrative instead of having it shaped for her. She'd point at things and wait for me to name them, then repeat the word until it sat right in her mouth. Nia learned slower, shyer, but her smile came easier now. The haunted look that had lived in her eyes was fading, replaced by something that might eventually be peace. I should have known the town wouldn't leave it alone forever. The storm that brought everything to a head started with supplies running low. I'd been putting off going to Broken Mesa, making do with what we had, but by mid-December, we needed flour, coffee, lamp oil, and a dozen other things I couldn't produce myself. The snow had melted enough to make the ride possible, and I couldn't avoid it any longer. I'll be back before dark, I told them that morning, checking Dakota's shoes one more time. You need anything specific? Aloe and Nia exchanged a look, one of those silent conversations siblings could have without words. Then Aloe said, "We go with you." I stopped what I was doing. "You don't have to do that." "We know," Aloe said, that familiar phrase that meant choice, not obligation. "But we do not hide. We are not ashamed. We go." There was something in her voice, defiance maybe, or just the steel core I'd seen glimpses of since the beginning. She was tired of being invisible, of living like a secret. I understood that. I'd cut their ropes in public. Might as well stand with them in public too. "All right," I said, "but townfolks can be—" "We know what townfolks are," Aloe interrupted quietly. "We have always known." The ride to Broken Mesa took 3 hours through snow-packed trails. Aloe rode behind me on Dakota, her arms wrapped around my waist for balance. Nia rode the mare I used for lighter work, moving slow but steady. Neither of them complained about the cold, though I could feel Aloe shivering against my back. We reached town just before noon. Main Street was busy with people doing their own winter provisioning wagons and horses creating a muddy slush in the road. The moment we appeared, conversation stopped, like someone had blown out a candle. Every head turned, every eye fixed on us, on me and the 2 Apache women I'd arrived with. I helped Aloe down from Dakota, then steadied Nia as she dismounted. The stairs felt physical, like hands pushing against us. I heard the whispers spreading like fire through dry grass. "That's Laramie, with those Apache girls. Heard he took them in? Wonder what he's using them for. Disgraceful keeping them like that." Aloe stood straighter, chin lifted, meeting every stare with eyes that refused to show fear. Nia moved closer to her sister but didn't hide behind her. They'd learned how to face this kind of attention long before I'd met them. "Come on," I said quietly, "trading post first." We walked down Main Street 3 abreast, and it felt like running a gauntlet. People didn't just stare, they made sure we knew they were staring. Mrs. Henderson pulled her daughter closer as we passed. 2 cowboys outside the saloon laughed and said something crude I couldn't quite hear. The blacksmith just shook his head like I disappointed him personally. The trading post went silent when we entered. Tom Dixon stood behind the counter and his face went through about 5 different expressions before settling on uncomfortable neutrality. "Boon," he said carefully, "didn't expect to see you today." "Need supplies," I said, pulling out my list. "Flour, coffee, lamp oil." I rattled off the items while Aloy and Nia stayed close, not touching anything, just existing in a space that clearly didn't want them there. Tom filled the order without comment, but I could see him glancing at them, trying to figure out what to say or not say. Finally, as he was totaling up the cost, he lowered his voice. "People are talking, Boon, about you and them. You know how it is." "I know exactly how it is," I said. "That's why I'm not hiding them away like something shameful. I'm not saying you should. I'm just saying, be careful. Some folks won't see it the way you do. Some folks need to mind their own business." I paid, loaded the supplies, and we were heading for the door when Councilman Pritchard walked in with 2 other council members. He stopped dead when he saw us, his face flushing red. "Well," he said loudly, making sure everyone in the store could hear, "look who decided to show his face. Tell me, Laramie, you keeping those girls civilized like we talked about, or you just keeping them?" The insinuation hung in the air like smoke. Alo's hand found mine, not seeking protection, but offering solidarity. I felt her fingers tighten. "They're free women living on my land," I said evenly, "working because they choose to. That's all there is to it." "That's so." Pritchard stepped closer and I could smell whiskey on his breath even though it wasn't yet noon. "Funny thing about choice. Doesn't mean much when you got nowhere else to go, does it? Seems to me a man could make a woman think she's choosing when really she's just trapped different." "You need to stop talking now," I said quietly. "Or what, you going to threaten a councilman in front of witnesses?" He looked around at the other men who'd gathered, sensing drama. "I'm just asking questions decent folks are wondering. What exactly is your arrangement with these squaws? You running some kind of—" Alo spoke before I could. Her voice cut through the tension like a blade, clear and strong, and carrying more authority than Pritchard could ever manufacture. "We work. We are free. That is all." She looked directly at Pritchard, and I saw him flinch from whatever he saw in her eyes. "Boon never touch us, never force, never own. He gives shelter, we give work. Equal. You understand, equal?" The last word had an edge that could cut. Several men in the store shifted uncomfortably. Pritchard's face went redder. "Now listen here, girl." "She's not a girl." I interrupted, my voice hard as winter iron. "She's a woman. Her name is Alo. Her sister's name is Nia. And they're under my protection, which means you speak to them with respect or you don't speak at all." Pritchard stared at me, and I could see him calculating, weighing his pride against whatever he saw in my face. I'd been a sheriff for 5 years. I'd put down range wars, stopped lynchings, faced down men meaner and more dangerous than Pritchard could ever be. He might have forgotten that, but his body remembered. He stepped back. "This ain't over," he muttered. "You're making a mistake, Laramie. This whole town sees it." "Then the whole town can mind its business," I said. "We're leaving now." We walked out into the cold sunlight, and I could feel every eye in Broken Mesa tracking us. The whispers followed us all the way to the horses. Someone spat in the street as we passed. A woman pulled her children inside like we carried disease. Alo helped Nia mount, then turned to me. Her face was calm, but I could see the toll it had taken, the effort of standing proud while being treated like dirt. "This will not be easier," she said quietly. "You know this. Yes, they will talk. They will make trouble." "I know. You can still send us away. We would understand. We would not. I'm not sending you anywhere, I said firmly. You live on my land. You eat at my table. You're free women making your own choices. That's not up for negotiation with Pritchard or anyone else. Something shifted in her expression. Gratitude, yes, but also something fiercer. She stepped closer, so close I could see gold flecks in her dark eyes. Why you do this, she asked. Why you defend us, fight for us, risk your place here. Because it's right, I said simply. Because you deserve better, because I cut your ropes in front of everyone, and that meant something, still means something. She studied my face for a long moment, and when she spoke again, her voice was softer. You are different man, Boon Laramie, different from any I know. Then she mounted behind me, and we rode home through the cold, leaving Broken Mesa and its judgment behind. That night, after a quiet dinner where none of us spoke about what had happened, I sat outside on the porch despite the cold. Needed to think, needed to process what this meant going forward. The town wouldn't forget. Pritchard wouldn't let it go. I'd made myself an outsider by standing with them, and there'd be consequences. The door opened behind me. Aloe came out wrapped in one of my heavy coats and sat beside me on the steps. We'd done this before, sat together in comfortable silence, but tonight felt different, charged somehow. Nia is sleeping, she said. The ride, it tire her. She is stronger now, but not all strong yet. She's healing, I said. That takes time. Yes, Aloe pulled the coat tighter. Everything worth having takes time, I think. Trust, healing. Understanding who is good and who is not. She paused. You never ask us about before, about what happened. Wasn't my business unless you wanted to share it. Most men would ask, would want details, would want to know how broken we are. You're not broken, I said like I'd said before. Hurt, yes. Surviving, yes, but not broken. She was quiet for a moment, then she started talking. Her voice was low, steady, like she'd practiced this story in her head until she could tell it without falling apart. The men who take us, they raid our village, kill our parents, our brothers, take Nia and me because we are young, because we are... She struggled for the word, because we are useful to them. 6 months they keep us. 6 months of... She stopped, breathed deep. You know what they do. Everyone knows what men do to captured women. My hands clenched into fists. I wanted to ask if it was the Garrett gang, wanted names, wanted the satisfaction of knowing those men were dead or in prison. But I stayed quiet, let her tell it her way. Then soldiers raid the camp, kill some of the men, capture others, find us. But soldiers, they look at us like we are dirty now, like we are guilty of what was done to us. They bring us to Broken Mesa, give us to council. Council try to decide what to do with 2 Apache women nobody want. Then they tried to give you to me, I finished. Yes, and you cut the ropes. She turned to look at me fully. You know what that mean to us in that moment. Tell me. It mean maybe we are still people. Maybe we are still worth something. Maybe the world has not all gone to evil and shame. Her eyes glistened in the lamplight. Nia, she wanted to die during those 6 months. Every day she asks spirits to take her, but I make her promise to live. I tell her maybe someday we find good again, find reason, find purpose. She reached out and touched my hand. You are that reason, Boon. You give us back purpose. Give us back choice. Give us back ourselves. I didn't know what to say to that. The weight of it was too much, the idea that my simple act of decency had meant the difference between life and death for 2 people. I just did what anyone should have done, I finally said. No, Aloe said firmly. You did what almost no one would do. You see us as people when everyone else see us as things. You give us freedom and respect and safety, and you ask nothing for it, nothing. She moved closer, and I could feel the warmth of her even through the cold. That is not normal, that is not common, that is rare, precious. The air between us felt thick with something I couldn't name, understanding maybe, connection, the kind of bond that forms when people save each other in ways that matter. Aloe. I started, not sure what I wanted to say. She put her finger to my lips, silencing me. I want to tell you something, and you listen. Yes, just listen. I nodded. I am not offering because I owe you. I am not offering because I have no choice. I am not offering because I think I must. She took a breath, her eyes locked on mine. I am offering because I want to, because when I look at you, I see a man who is good, really good, deep in his soul, good, and it has been so long since I believe such men exist that Her voice caught. I want to choose you, not because I have to, because I want to. Then she leaned forward and kissed me. It was gentle, tentative, like she was afraid I might push her away. But I didn't, I couldn't, because this wasn't about obligation or power or any of the ugly things that usually tangled up men and women. This was about two broken people finding something whole in each other, about choice freely made, about the possibility that maybe, just maybe, something good could grow from all this pain. When we pulled apart, her eyes were wet but smiling. You can say no, she whispered. You can say this is not right, not proper. I would understand. I would not. I'm not saying no, I said quietly, but I need you to be sure. Need you to know that there's no pressure, no expectation. You're free here, Aloe, always free. I know, she said. That is why I choose this. Choose you. She stood, held out her hand. Come inside. Come be with someone who sees you as clearly as you see me. I took her hand and let her lead me into the house, into the warmth, into whatever this was becoming. That night, wrapped in blankets with Aloe sleeping against my chest, and Nia safe in the next room, I understood something I'd been circling around for weeks. This was family. Not the kind you're born into, the kind you choose, the kind you build from nothing, from shared survival, from the decision to be decent when the world makes it easier to be cruel. I'd cut their ropes, thinking I was just refusing to participate in something wrong, but I'd done more than that. I'd opened the door to something right, something worth protecting, and I'd protect it. Against the town, against Pritchard, against anyone who tried to tell us that this wasn't exactly what it should be. Two women who'd been treated as property, now free. One man who'd been alone, now connected. Three people who'd found each other in the worst circumstances and decided to make something better. The world outside could talk all it wanted. Inside these walls, we were building something they'd never understand. And that was enough. The morning after brought no regret, only a quiet understanding that hung between us like sunlight through morning fog. Aloe woke before dawn as she always did, but this time she didn't slip away immediately. She stayed pressed against me for a few moments, her breath warm on my chest, her fingers tracing idle patterns on my skin, like she was memorizing something she was afraid to lose. You are awake, she said softly. I am. You have regret? No, I said, and meant it completely. Do you? She lifted her head to look at me, and her eyes held that fierce clarity I'd come to recognize as her truest self. No, I choose you. I choose this. I do not regret my choices. We rose and dressed in comfortable silence, the intimacy of the night before, settling into something sustainable, something that could exist in daylight. When we emerged into the main room, Nia was already up building the fire. She looked at us, at the way Aloe's hand lingered on my arm, and something passed across her face, understanding perhaps, or concern. She spoke in Apache, her voice questioning. Aloe answered in the same language, her tone reassuring. Nia listened, then looked at me with eyes that were trying to read my intentions, trying to determine if this changed their safety here. She wants to know if this means we leave now, Aloe translated. She thinks maybe you want only me, not both of us. She thinks maybe she becomes burden. I crossed to where Nia stood and knelt so we were eye level. She flinched slightly, old instincts dying hard, but held her ground. You're not a burden, I said slowly, hoping she'd understand the tone, if not all the words. Both of you are welcome here. Both of you are safe here. That hasn't changed. That will never change. You understand?" Naya studied my face for a long moment, then touched my shoulder gently. She spoke in halting English words she'd been practicing but rarely used. "You, good man, I know this. I just afraid, always afraid good things leave." "I'm not leaving," I said, "and neither are you, unless you want to." She nodded satisfied and turned back to the fire. But I caught the glance she shared with Aloe, something sisterly, and knowing something that said they'd talk about this later in their own language, in their own way. The routine of the ranch continued through December and into January, but everything felt different now. Not worse, not better exactly, just deeper, more rooted. Aloe and I were careful not to let our relationship overshadow Naya's place here, not to make her feel like an outsider in the home she'd helped build. Most nights I still slept alone, giving them their space, their privacy. But sometimes Aloe would slip into my room after Nia was asleep, and we'd hold each other like people afraid the world might snatch away this fragile thing we'd found. The town's judgment intensified through winter. Word had spread about Aloe and me, probably from someone who'd seen us in Broken Mesa, probably exaggerated with each telling. When I went for supplies alone in late January, the stares had hardened into something uglier. People crossed the street to avoid me. The preacher's wife loudly proclaimed that I was living in sin, keeping a heathen woman like a concubine. Tom Dixon served me at the trading post, but wouldn't meet my eyes. "You've made yourself an outcast," he said quietly as he counted my change. "You know that, right?" "I know." "Was it worth it for two Apache women nobody wants anyway?" I looked at him, then really looked, and saw a man who'd never once in his life chosen principle over comfort, conviction over convenience. "Yes," I said, "it was worth it. It is worth it." He shook his head like I was speaking a language he couldn't comprehend. Maybe I was. February brought bitter cold and something else, something I didn't see coming, even though maybe I should have. I was in the barn repairing a saddle when Nia came looking for me. Her face was pale, her hands trembling where she clutched her shawl. She stood in the doorway like she was afraid to come closer, afraid of what she had to say. "Boon," she said, my name still awkward in her mouth. "I need tell you something important." I set down the leather and gave her my full attention. "What is it?" She took a breath, then another, gathering courage. When she spoke, the words came slowly, carefully formed. "Before the men take us, before everything bad, there was..." She struggled, then switched to Apache, speaking rapidly to Aloe, who'd appeared behind her. Aloe's face went carefully neutral as she listened. Then she looked at me, and I saw both protectiveness and resignation in her eyes. "Nia is pregnant," Aloe said quietly. "From before we were taken. There was a man in our village, good man, they were to marry, but then the raid came and he died and we were taken and..." She paused. She did not know until a few weeks ago, was not sure if it was his or from after, but she is certain now, the timing. It is his child, the good man's child. The world seemed to still. Naya watched me with eyes that expected judgment, expected rejection, expected me to turn her out for bringing this complication into my home. Instead, I felt something settle in my chest, something like purpose, like rightness. "How far along?" I asked. 4 months, maybe more," Aloe said. "She will show soon, will not be able to hide much longer. And she's been afraid to tell me because she thought I'd send her away." "Yes." I looked at Nia, at this young woman who'd survived more than anyone should have to, who was now carrying the last piece of a man she'd loved and lost. "You're not going anywhere," I said firmly. "We'll need supplies, linen, more medicine, whatever herbs and remedies you know for pregnancy. We'll need to prepare." Nia's eyes filled with tears. She spoke in Apache, her voice breaking. "She says she did not expect kindness." Aloe translated her own voice thick. "She expected shame, anger, to be cast out." She says you make her believe in spirits again, in goodness again. She says, Aloe stopped wiping her own eyes. She says you will make good father even to child not yours. The child is hers, I said. That makes it family. That makes it worth protecting. That night we sat around the fire and talked about what this meant, what we'd need, what could go wrong. Naya's pregnancy from before captivity meant the child was wanted, loved, legitimate in every way that mattered. But it also meant complications. A mixed-blood child, born to an Apache woman living with a white man, would face judgment from every direction. The town will talk more, Aloe said. We'll say terrible things. We'll say you are father, that we are your... She couldn't find the English word. Concubines, I finished. Prostitutes. They'll say I'm running some kind of immoral household. Yes, we'll make life hard for you, for us, for child. Let them talk, I said. We know the truth. That's what matters. But even as I said it, I knew we were walking into something difficult. A child changed everything, made this permanent in a way it hadn't been before, made our little found family visible and vulnerable in ways we couldn't protect against. The next 2 months were spent preparing. I rode through late snow to get supplies from a trading post 2 days away where nobody knew me and I could buy baby clothes and linens without judgment. Aloe and Naya worked together to prepare the small room, making it suitable for a mother and infant. They gathered herbs, made medicines, prepared for every possibility. Naya's belly began to show by March, and with it came a kind of quiet joy I hadn't expected. She'd place her hands on her stomach and speak softly in Apache, telling her unborn child about his father, about the man who'd loved her and died protecting their village. Aloe would translate sometimes, and the stories were beautiful tales of a brave man, a kind man, a man who'd promised to grow old with Naya and build a life worth living. She deserved that life, Aloe said one evening after Naya had gone to bed. She deserved love and safety and happiness. Instead, she got violence and captivity and loss. She's getting safety now, I said, and maybe not the love she expected, but love nonetheless, family at least. Aloe looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. You really see us as family truly. What else would you be? Obligation, burden, charity case, many things before family. Then I see things different than most, I said. She kissed me then, deep and grateful. Yes, you do. That is why we stay, why we choose to stay. April brought warmth and the beginning of real spring. The desert bloomed with flowers that existed for only a few weeks before the heat killed them, a brief, desperate beauty that reminded you to appreciate what you had while you had it. Nia was large now, moving slowly, her face showing the strain of carrying a child in her small frame. We watched her carefully, Aloe and I, making sure she rested, making sure she ate enough, making sure she wasn't pushing too hard. One afternoon in late April, I was working on expanding the chicken coop when a horse approached from the direction of town. I straightened, hand moving instinctively to where my gun would be if I still wore one. Visitors were rare, and given how things stood with Broken Mesa, unlikely to be friendly. The rider was Deputy Marshal Webb, and he didn't look happy to be here. He dismounted slowly, like a man who'd rather be anywhere else. Laramie. Webb. Need to talk to you. Official business. I set down my hammer and faced him fully. What kind of official business? He glanced toward the house where Aloe and Nia were visible through the window. About your situation here. Been complaints filed with the territorial marshal. Concerns about the nature of your household. Concerns from who? Pritchard, among others. Look, I'm not here to judge. I'm just here to inform you that there's been questions raised about whether those women are here of their own free will, whether this is a proper Christian household or something else. Anger flared hot in my chest. You think I'm keeping them prisoner after I'm the one who cut them free? I don't think anything, Boon, but the law requires me to investigate complaints. I need to speak with them, verify they're here willingly. I wanted to throw him off my property, Wanted to tell him and Pritchard and the whole damn town to go to hell, but that would only make things worse, only give them ammunition to use against us. Fine, I said. You can ask them, but you do it respectfully, or this conversation ends right now. Aloe and Nia came out onto the porch when I called them. Nia's pregnancy was obvious now, her belly round and full, and I saw Webb's eyes widen slightly when he saw it. The calculations were already happening in his head, the assumptions, the judgments. Ma'am, Webb said, addressing Aloe, I need to ask you some questions about your living situation here. Ask, Aloe said, her voice cool and controlled. Are you here by choice? Is anyone forcing you to stay? No one force. We choose to stay. And your relationship with Mr. Laramie, is that voluntary? Aloe's eyes flashed dangerously. You ask if he forced me to his bed, if he owned me like the council try to make him own me. Webb shifted uncomfortably. I'm just asking. I choose him, Aloe said clearly. He never take, he never demand. He offers safety and respect and freedom. I choose to give myself to him because I want to, because he is good man. You understand? Choice, not force, not ownership, choice. Webb turned to Nia, who stood with her hands on her swollen belly, protective and defiant. And you, ma'am, that child, is it his? Before I could tell Webb that was none of his damn business, Nia spoke up in her careful English. Child is from before, from man I love in my village. Good man, dead now. This child is all I have of him. She touched her belly gently. Boon, give me place to bring my baby safe. Give me home. Give me family. He is not father of body, but he is father of heart. You understand? Webb looked uncomfortable now, like this wasn't going the way he'd expected. So you're saying you're both here willingly, nobody's forcing you, and you consider this a proper household? Proper. Aloe's voice had steel in it. We do not know what you call proper. We know only that we are free here. We are respected here. We are loved here. We work because we choose. We stay because we choose. We live because finally someone let us choose. If that is not proper, then proper is broken. Webb was quiet for a long moment, then he nodded. All right, that's what I needed to hear. He turned to me. I'll report back that both women confirm they're here voluntarily. But Laramie, you need to understand this isn't going to stop the talk. Especially with one of them pregnant. People are going to assume the worst. Let them assume, I said. We know the truth. After Webb rode away, Aloe came to stand beside me. We watched him disappear into the distance back toward town and its judgment. It will get worse, she said quietly. When baby comes, when they see Apache child in your home, they will not understand, will not accept. I know. You could still send us away before baby comes. Save yourself trouble. I turned to face her fully. How many times do I have to say it? You're not going anywhere. Neither is Nia. Neither is that child when it comes. This is your home, our home, and anyone who doesn't like it can go straight to hell. She smiled then, fierce and grateful. You are stubborn man, Boon Laramie. So I've been told. That night, Nia's labor started. It began with small contractions, barely noticeable, but Aloe recognized them immediately. She'd helped deliver babies in their village, knew the signs. We moved Nia to her bed and prepared everything we'd gathered over the past months. Clean linen, hot water, the medicines and herbs Aloe had ready. The labor was long and hard. Nia labored through the night, her face sheened with sweat, her hands gripping Aloe's with strength born of desperation. I stayed close, doing what I could, keeping water boiling, bringing fresh cloths, offering what comfort a man could offer in a situation that was ultimately beyond his understanding. Around dawn, Nia's strength began to flag. The contractions were strong, but the baby wasn't coming, and I could see fear creeping into Aloe's eyes. Something is wrong, Aloe said quietly. Baby is turned wrong or stuck. I do not know how to. What do you need? I asked. In our village there was old woman who knew the ways of birth. She could turn baby, could help when labor went bad. but she is gone. Dead or on reservation, I do not know. I do not have her knowledge. I thought fast. The doctor in town will not come for Apache woman. You know this. She was right. But I couldn't just stand here and watch Naya suffer, watch this baby die before it even had a chance to breathe. Then I'll bring him, I said, whether he wants to come or not. I rode through the early morning cold like the devil himself was chasing me, pushing Dakota harder than I should have, desperation overriding caution. The town was just waking when I pounded on Doc Morrison's door, not caring who I woke or what they thought. Doc Morrison opened the door in his nightshirt, irritated and confused. He was old, grizzled, with hands that shook slightly from years of whiskey, but he was the only medical help within 50 miles. Laramie, what? I need you, I said. Woman in labor at my place. Something's wrong. Baby won't come. His face closed off immediately. One of those Apache girls. Does it matter? It does if you expect me to ride out there at dawn for... I grabbed his shirt and pulled him close past caring about propriety or consequences. A woman is dying. A child is dying. You took an oath to help people, didn't you? Or did that oath only cover white folks? He stared at me, anger and something else, maybe shame, flickering in his eyes. You're asking me to help a squaw who got herself pregnant out of wedlock, living in sin with you. I'm asking you to help a human being, I said. Nothing more, nothing less. You coming or not? He pulled free from my grip and stood there for a long moment, weighing his reputation against his conscience. Finally, he cursed under his breath and turned inside. Give me 5 minutes to get dressed, but this doesn't mean I approve of your situation. Don't care if you approve, just need your hands and your knowledge. The ride back seemed to take forever, though we made good time. I could hear Nia's cries from outside the house, weak, now exhausted. Aloe met us at the door, her face streaked with tears. She cannot push anymore. She tries, but she has no strength left. Doc Morrison pushed past her without ceremony and went to Nia's bedside. He examined her quickly, professionally, his personal feelings set aside in the face of medical necessity. Baby's breech, he said. Need to turn it. This is going to hurt. What followed was the longest hour of my life. Doc Morrison worked with skill born of decades of practice trying to turn the baby into position for birth. Nia screamed, her body pushed beyond endurance. Aloe held her whispering prayers in Apache. I stood by, useless and helpless, able only to watch. Then finally, after what felt like an eternity, the baby came. Doc Morrison caught her, and it was a her. I saw immediately, and she wasn't crying. She was blue, limp, silent. My heart stopped. Come on, Doc Morrison muttered, clearing her mouth, rubbing her back. Come on, little one, breathe. Nothing. He turned her over, pressed on her chest, breathed into her tiny mouth. Still nothing. Then just when I thought we'd lost her, she gasped. A small, weak sound, then another, then finally a cry, thin and reedy but real. She was alive. Doc Morrison handed the baby to Aloe, who wrapped her in clean linen with shaking hands. Naya reached out with the last of her strength, and Aloe placed the child in her mother's arms. Nia looked at her daughter, this tiny life that had survived against all odds, and began to weep. Not from pain now, from joy so profound it had nowhere else to go. Doc Morrison stood washing his hands in the basin, his face carefully neutral. Mother and child should be fine. Keep them warm, keep them clean, make sure mother eats and rests. I'll leave some instructions. Thank you, I said, and meant it with everything in me. Thank you. He looked at me, then really looked, and I saw something complicated in his eyes. You're making your life hard, Laramie. Harder than it needs to be. Maybe, I said, but it's the right kind of hard. He shook his head and gathered his things. I paid him twice what he asked, and he took it without comment. At the door, he paused. That child deserves a chance, he said quietly. Whatever else is true, that child deserves a chance at life. You give her that at least. Then he was gone, riding back toward town, and whatever judgment waited there. I returned to the bedroom to find Aloe and Nia bent over the baby, counting fingers and toes, marveling at this new life they'd fought so hard to bring into the world. The baby was small, dark-haired, with her mother's features and her father's, whoever he'd been, strength evident even in her tiny form. Nia looked up at me, her face exhausted but radiant. She held out the baby, offering her to me. I hesitated. "I don't know how to." "Please," Nia said softly. "Please hold her. You save her life. You bring doctor. You make her birth possible. You hold her." Carefully, awkwardly, I took the baby into my arms. She was so small, so fragile, lighter than anything I'd ever held. She opened her eyes, dark eyes like her mother's, and looked at me with that unfocused newborn gaze that nonetheless felt like it was seeing straight through to my soul. "She needs name," Aloe said. "In our tradition, important person in child's life gives name. Her mother should name her," I said. Nia shook her head weakly. "You name her. You bring her safe to world. You give name." I looked down at this tiny person, this new life that had come into being against all odds, in the middle of judgment and hardship, and a world that would make her life difficult just for existing. But she was here. She was alive. She was perfect. "Hope," I said. "Her name is Hope." Aloe translated for Nia, who smiled and nodded. "Hope," she repeated in English. "Good name, true name." That night, with Nia and Hope sleeping peacefully, and Aloe dozing in a chair beside them, I stood on the porch and looked out at the desert, bathed in starlight. Somewhere in town, people were already talking about this, about the Apache baby born in Boon Laramie's house, about what it meant, about what kind of man I was. Let them talk. I'd helped bring a life into this world, had given 3 people, now 4, a place to call home, had chosen compassion over convenience, family over isolation, love over judgment. That was enough. That had to be enough. And when Hope grew up and asked who I was, what I meant to her, I'd tell her the truth. I was the man who held her first, who fought for her life before she drew her first breath, who chose to be her family even though blood didn't bind us. Sometimes that's more than enough. Sometimes that's everything. The weeks that followed Hope's birth brought a transformation to the ranch that went deeper than the greening of spring grass or the lengthening of days. There was a child in the house now, and with her came a kind of purpose that reorganized everything around her small, insistent presence. Nia recovered slowly, her body healing from the trauma of birth, while her spirit seemed to grow stronger each day. She'd sit in the rocking chair. I'd dragged in from the barn Hope at her breast, and sing old Apache songs that made the air feel thick with history and belonging. Sometimes Aloe would join in their voices, harmonizing in ways that suggested these were songs passed down through generations, songs that had survived everything trying to destroy them. I found myself watching them in those moments, these 3 lives I'd somehow become responsible for, and feeling something I hadn't felt since before the war, before the badge, before I'd learned how cruel the world could be. It wasn't quite peace. The town's judgment still hung over us like a storm cloud, but it was close. It was the possibility of peace, which was more than I'd had in years. Hope was a good baby as far as I understood such things. She cried when hungry or wet, slept in stretches that Nia said were generous, and had already learned to grip a finger with surprising strength. When she looked at you with those dark, unfocused eyes, it felt like she was memorizing your face, storing it away for when she'd need to know who her people were. "She knows you," Aloe said one evening, watching me hold Hope while Nia prepared dinner. "Already she knows your voice, your smell. When you hold her, she calms." "Probably just tired," I said, but even I could hear the warmth in my voice, the softness that crept in when I talked about Hope. "No," Aloe said firmly. "She knows her father. I'm not her father. You are the man who saved her life, the man who gives her home and safety and love, the man who will protect her and teach her and be there when she needs strength." Aloe moved closer, placing her hand over mine where it supported Hope's small body. Blood does not make father, choice does, love does. You are her father in every way that matters. I couldn't argue with that, didn't want to. So I just held Hope a little closer and let myself feel what I'd been trying not to name, this fierce protective love for a child who'd only been in the world a few weeks, but had already changed everything. May brought the confrontation I'd been expecting since Hope's birth. I was in town buying supplies, coffee mostly, and sugar things we couldn't produce ourselves. The stares were worse than ever hostile now instead of just judgmental. Mrs. Henderson actually crossed to the other side of the street when she saw me pulling her children along like I carried disease. Tom Dixon served me in silence, his face carefully blank, taking my money like it was contaminated. I was loading the supplies onto Dakota when Councilman Pritchard approached with 3 other members of the town council, self-appointed guardians of Broken Mesa's moral character. They formed a loose semicircle around me, blocking my path. "Laramie," Pritchard said, his voice carrying that false friendliness that preceded something ugly. "Been meaning to talk to you about your situation." "What situation is that?" I kept my voice level, hands visible, not looking for trouble, but ready for it if it came. "The Apache women, and now the baby. The whole town's talking, Laramie, saying you're living in sin, keeping a harem, corrupting those girls, and bringing half-breed children into good Christian territory." The words hit like fists, each one carefully chosen to wound. I felt anger rise hot in my chest, but kept it contained. Losing my temper was what they wanted, what would give them justification for whatever they'd already decided to do. "Those women are free," I said clearly. "They live on my land by choice, work by choice, stay by choice. The child is Nia's from before she was captured. None of this is your business or the town's business. It becomes our business when it affects the moral character of the community," one of the other men said. "We got families here, children who need to be raised with proper values. Can't have that with you flaunting your immoral household." Immoral. The word came out hard as a hammer strike. "You want to talk about immoral? You tried to give me human beings as property. Tried to make me own 2 women like they were cattle. You're the ones who need to examine your moral character, not me." Pritchard's face flushed red. "We were trying to help those squaws, give them purpose, direction. Instead, you've turned them into your personal—" "Finish that sentence," I interrupted, my voice dropping to something dangerous. "Go ahead, say what you're thinking, but know that when you do, we're past talking." He didn't finish it. Coward that he was, he knew better than to push me that far, but the threat hung in the air between us, ugly and obvious. "The council has discussed this," another man said. "We're prepared to offer you a solution. Send those women to the reservation where they belong. We'll even provide transport, make sure they get there safely. The child too. Then you can return to being a respectable member of this community instead of an outcast living in sin." For a moment, I couldn't speak. The audacity of it, thinking they could just remove Aloe and Naya and Hope from my life, ship them off to a reservation like unwanted cargo, all to preserve their narrow view of respectability. "No," I said simply. "Be reasonable, Laramie. You're throwing away your reputation. You're standing in this community for 2 Apache women and a half-breed child. Is it really worth it?" I looked at each of them in turn, these men who thought morality was about appearances and conformity, who couldn't understand that sometimes the right thing looks wrong to people who've never had to choose between comfort and conscience. "Yes," I said, "it's worth it, every bit of it. Those women and that child are my family, my choice, my responsibility. And if that makes me an outcast in your eyes, then I'll be an outcast. But I won't send them away to make you comfortable." "Then you leave us no choice," Pritchard said. "We'll have to take official action. Questions about the child's welfare, about whether those women are being coerced, about whether your household meets the standards of—" "Do what you need to do," I interrupted. "Bring your officials. Ask your questions. But you'll get the same answers you got from Deputy Webb. We're a family. free-willing and not asking for your approval or your interference. I pushed past them, mounted Dakota, and rode out of Broken Mesa with their stares burning into my back. My hands were shaking not from fear, but from the effort of not turning around and doing something I'd regret. When I got home, Aloe took one look at my face and knew something had happened. She sent Nia inside with Hope and joined me by the corral where I was unsaddling Dakota with more force than necessary. "Tell me," she said simply. I told her everything. The confrontation, the threats, the council's plan to remove them to a reservation. With each word, I watched her face harden, watched that fierce dignity I'd seen in the wagon that first day resurface. "They will not stop," she said when I finished. "They will keep pushing, keep trying to separate us, because we are their shame. We remind them of what they did, what they tried to make you do. As long as we are here living free, they are forced to see their own ugliness." "Then let them see it," I said. "Let them choke on it. You're not going anywhere." She studied me for a long moment, her dark eyes searching. "You would fight for us. Really fight, risk everything." "I already have," I said. "From the moment I cut those ropes, I made a choice. I'm not unmaking it now because some cowards in suits decided to grow a spine." She stepped closer, close enough that I could see the gold flecks in her eyes, the small scar above her left eyebrow, all the small details that made her uniquely herself. "Then we fight too, together, as family should." That night we made plans around the dinner table, the three of us, and Hope sleeping in a basket nearby. We talked about what the council might do, how we'd respond, what our options were if things got truly bad. Nia spoke more than usual, her English improving daily, her opinions clear despite the language barrier. "In our village," she said slowly, "when enemy come, we not hide, we stand, we show we are strong, we are here, we belong. This is same." She gestured to the house around us. "This is our village now. We not hide, we stand." "The town could make life very difficult," I said. "Could refuse to sell us supplies, could bring territorial authorities, could—" "Let them," Aloe interrupted. "We survive worse than difficult. We survive everything they cannot imagine. We survive and we build life anyway. That is what we do. That is what we are." Looking at them, these two women who'd been given to me as property and had become my partners, my companions, my family, I felt something shift inside me. They weren't asking me to protect them anymore. They were standing with me, ready to fight alongside me for this life we'd built together. "All right," I said, "we stand together." The confrontation came sooner than expected on a bright morning in late May when the desert was painted gold with sunlight and possibility. I was working near the house when I saw the riders approaching, 6 of them, led by Deputy Marshal Webb, and including Pritchard and 2 men I didn't recognize. Official business then, not just the council making noise. "Stay inside," I told Aloe and Nia, "but be ready." They nodded, and I saw Aloe reach for the rifle I'd taught her to use. I hoped it wouldn't come to that, but I was glad she was prepared. Webb dismounted first, his face apologetic but official. "Boone, this is Territorial Marshal Hendricks and Federal Agent Carson. They're here to investigate the complaints filed against you." Marshal Hendricks was a tall man with gray at his temples and eyes that had seen too much to be easily fooled. Agent Carson was younger, harder, with the rigid righteousness of someone who believed every rule mattered equally. "What complaints specifically?" I asked. "Allegations of coercion, inappropriate relations with Apache women, potential violation of federal regulations regarding Indian welfare." Hendricks spoke formally, but his eyes were taking in everything: the well-maintained ranch, the garden, the signs of a working household. "We need to interview the women and inspect the premises." "The women are free to speak with you," I said. "But with respect, they're not criminals, they're not property, they're people living their lives." "That's what we're here to determine," Carson said coldly. I called Aloe and Nia out. Nia carried Hope, who was awake and alert, her dark eyes taking in the strangers with infant curiosity. The 2 women stood on the porch, heads high, showing no fear despite the intimidating presence of armed officials. Hendricks approached slowly, carefully reading the situation with experienced eyes. "Ma'am," he said to Aloe, "I'm Marshal Hendricks. I need to ask you some questions." "Are you here willingly?" "Yes," Aloe said clearly. "Are you being coerced or forced to remain here?" "No." "What is your relationship with Mr. Laramie?" Aloe's eyes flashed. "He is my family. He saved us. Give us freedom. Give us choice. I choose to be with him, choose to stay, choose this life. You understand choice?" Hendricks nodded slowly. "And the child? There's been allegations that Mr. Laramie." "Child is mine." Naya spoke up, her English careful but firm. "From man I love before I am taken. Good man, dead now. Boon not father of body, but he saved child's life. Bring doctor, fight for her. He is father of heart." Agent Carson stepped forward, his face skeptical. "You expect us to believe that you're both here voluntarily in a relationship with a white man living in what appears to be an unconventional household arrangement, and you're happy with this situation?" "What we expect," Aloe said, her voice taking on an edge, sharp as broken glass, "is that you see us as people. People who make choices, people who have rights. We are not children. We are not property. We are women who choose our lives. If our choice is different from what you think proper, that is our right. Or do Apache women not have rights in your America?" The question hung in the air, challenging, defiant. Hendricks looked at Carson, then back at the women, then at me. I could see him processing everything, the way Aloe and Naya stood with confidence, not fear, the well-cared-for child, the obvious signs of a functioning household, the complete absence of anything resembling coercion. "May we inspect the premises?" Hendricks asked. "Yes," I said. "Look wherever you want." They spent an hour going through the house and property. They found separate sleeping areas, a nursery set up with care supplies, appropriate for a family, evidence of work and partnership. They found nothing to support the claims of coercion or abuse. They found instead a home. When they emerged, Hendricks pulled me aside while Carson spoke with Pritchard, who looked increasingly frustrated. "Off the record," Hendricks said quietly, "I've investigated actual cases of coercion and abuse. This isn't that. Those women are here by choice, that's clear. The child is well cared for. Your household, while unconventional, isn't illegal." He paused. "But you need to understand you're making enemies. Powerful ones. They're going to keep pushing." "Let them push," I said. "I'm not giving up my family to make narrow-minded men comfortable." He studied me for a long moment, then nodded. "I respect that. I don't agree with all your choices, but I respect the conviction behind them." He lowered his voice further. "My advice? Make it official. Legal, I mean. Marry one of them, adopt the child if you can. Give them legal protection. It's harder to attack a legal family than an unconventional household." I hadn't thought of that, but it made sense. Marriage would give Aloe legal standing, legal protection. Adoption would do the same for Hope. "Thank you," I said. After they left, Carson still skeptical. Hendricks satisfied, Pritchard furious. I gathered Aloe and Naya in the house and told them what Hendricks had suggested. "Marriage," Aloe repeated, testing the word. "Official, legal. It would protect you," I said. "Give you rights. Make it harder for them to separate us or take Hope." She was quiet for a long moment, and I couldn't read her expression. Finally, she said, "You want to marry me truly, not just for protection." "I want you protected," I said honestly, "but I also want us to be official in every way that matters. So yes, I want to marry you, if you'll have me." Aloe looked at Nia, who smiled and nodded. Some silent communication passed between them, some understanding forged in shared survival. Then Aloe turned back to me. "Yes," she said simply. "I marry you. We make this official. We show them we are real family, not shame, not sin family." We rode to Broken Mesa the next week, all four of us, me and Aloe, Nia, carrying Hope. We went straight to the territorial courthouse, bypassing the town entirely. The clerk who processed our marriage license looked scandalized but couldn't refuse us. Arizona territory had no law against interracial marriage, even if the practice was rare and frowned upon. The judge who married us did so with barely concealed distaste, rushing through the ceremony like we were contaminated. But we didn't care. We said our vows, simple ones, honest ones, and signed our names in the registry. Boon Laramie. It looked right. Written out, looked real. Walking out of that courthouse as a married couple with Naya and Hope beside us felt like planting a flag. This is who we are. This is our family. Deal with it. The town did deal with it in its way, which is to say they tried to pretend we don't exist. When we came for supplies, people looked through us. Conversation stopped when we approached, resumed when we left. We were ghosts, invisible except as objects of whispered judgment. But we didn't need their approval. We had something better. We had each other. Summer came hot and bright, and Hope grew. She learned to smile, to recognize faces, to grip toys with determined hands. Naya healed fully and grew stronger each day, her laughter returning, her joy in her daughter, evident in every moment. Aloe settled into her role as wife, not as submission, but as partnership, as equal standing in a shared life. The ranch prospered, with 3 of us working 4 once. Nia was strong enough. We produced more than we needed. Sold the surplus, saved money. We expanded the garden, increased the herd, improved the property. We built something that lasted, something that mattered. One evening in late summer, I sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the cliffs red and gold. Aloe sat beside me, her head on my shoulder. Inside, I could hear Naya singing to Hope one of those old Apache songs that made the past feel present and honored. "You are happy?" Aloe asked quietly. "Yes," I said, and meant it completely. "Are you?" "More than I thought possible. More than I deserve after everything." "You deserve everything," I said firmly. "You and Nia both. You survived things that would break most people. You deserve every bit of happiness you can find." She was quiet for a moment, then said, "When they give us to you that day, I thought we were dead. Thought maybe not body dead yet, but soul dead. Thought whatever came next would just be slow dying." She turned to look at me. "But you give us back life, real life, not just surviving, living, choosing, being people again." "You were always people," I said. "I just recognized it." "No," she said softly. "You did more than recognize. You defended. You protected. You stood with us when it would have been easier to stand away. You chose us over comfort, over acceptance, over everything that makes life easy." She took my hand. "You are good man, Boon Laramie. Best man I ever know, and I thank spirits every day they bring you to us. Even in worst way they bring you, and that save us." I didn't know what to say to that, so I just held her hand and watched the sun sink lower, painting the whole world in colors that would fade, but would return again tomorrow, constant as hope, persistent as love. October brought the first real test of our official family status. A group of Apache activists from the reservation came to Broken Mesa seeking help relocating tribe members to better land. They heard about Aloe and Naya and came to the ranch. The leader was an older man named Standing Bear, who spoke both Apache and perfect English. He sat on our porch and listened to Aloe and Nia's story, translated for the others in his group, and then was quiet for a long time. "Your people would welcome you back," he finally said. "We're rebuilding, creating new communities. You could come home." I felt my chest tighten, afraid suddenly that this was it, that they'd choose to leave to return to their own people, and I'd lose this family I'd only just made official. But Aloe shook her head. "This is home now. We respect our people. We honor our traditions. But we build new life here, with Boon, with Hope. This is our tribe now." Naya nodded agreement, pulling Hope closer. "We not forget where we come from, but we choose where we go. We choose to stay." Standing Bear looked at me, then assessment clear in his eyes. "You treat them well. They're truly free." "Yes," I said. "To stay or go, always their choice." He nodded slowly. Then you are better man than most I meet. You honor them. That is good. He stood preparing to leave. If you ever need help, if anyone tries to hurt your family, you send word to reservation. We protect our own, and they are still our own, even here. After they left, I realized what had happened. We'd been acknowledged, recognized. Our family had been seen and accepted by people whose opinion mattered to Alo and Naya. It was different from town acceptance, better, more meaningful. Winter returned, completing the cycle of our first year as an official family. Hope celebrated her first birthday with a small ceremony. Nia led Apache traditions mixed with the life we'd built here. She was walking now, tottering around on unsteady legs, babbling in a mixture of Apache and English, bringing light to every room she entered. One morning in December, almost exactly a year after Hope's birth, I rode into town alone for supplies. When I tied Dakota outside the trading post, I found Councilman Pritchard waiting, but his attitude had changed. He looked older, defeated somehow. "Laramie," he said quietly. "Got a minute?" I nodded, wary. "Been thinking a lot this past year, about that day we tried to give you those women, about what we did, what we thought was acceptable." He looked away, unable to meet my eyes. "My daughter asked me last week why you're not welcome in church anymore. She's 7. She wanted to know what you did that was so bad." He paused, and I couldn't answer her, because the truth is you didn't do anything bad. We did, and you've been paying for not participating in our ugliness. I didn't say anything, just waited. "I'm not speaking for the whole council," he continued, "but I'm speaking for me. I was wrong. What we did was wrong. Trying to give you people like property, then condemning you for treating them like people. It was all wrong. You're a better man than any of us, and I'm sorry." He held out his hand. I looked at it for a long moment, thinking about all the times this man had made my life harder, had tried to separate my family, had represented everything I'd been fighting against. I could reject his apology, could hold the grudge, could make him feel the full weight of his guilt. But that wasn't who I wanted to be, wasn't the example I wanted to set for Hope. I shook his hand. "Apology accepted," I said, "but understand, I'm not looking for the town's acceptance. I'm not looking for anyone's approval. My family is my family. That doesn't change whether you approve or not." "I understand," he said, "but maybe it's time the town changed. Maybe you're showing us something we need to learn." I didn't stay to see if he meant it or not. But riding home, I felt something shift, not in me, but in how I thought about the future. Maybe Broken Mesa would change. Maybe it wouldn't. Either way, we'd be fine, because we had something they didn't understand, something they'd tried to destroy, but had only made stronger. We had family, real family, the kind built on choice and respect and love that survived despite everything working against it. That evening I sat at our dinner table with Alo beside me, Naya across from us, and Hope in a high chair I'd built, making a mess of her food and laughing at absolutely nothing the way babies do. The house smelled like cooking and sage and home. The fire crackled warm against the cold outside. Somewhere in the distance a coyote called to the moon. Alo reached over and took my hand. Nia smiled at both of us. Hope banged her spoon and demanded more food in her toddler gibberish. This was it. This was what I'd been fighting for. Not approval, not acceptance. Just this, the simple, profound dignity of people choosing each other, standing with each other, building a life that honored everyone's humanity. I'd cut 2 women free from ropes in front of a whole town, thinking I was just refusing to participate in something wrong. But I'd done more than that. I'd opened the door to something right, something worth every bit of judgment and isolation and struggle. I'd found my family, and they'd found me, and nothing the world threw at us would ever change that simple, powerful truth. We were free, we were chosen, we were home, and that was more than enough. That was everything.